To tuck the octopus. So I've been asked a lot of questions about cookie consent, consent preference, and data subject access requests. So I put together this presentation. I just want to run through it very quickly with you. And so off we go. So what does it feel like to run a business? We all know that running a business is like trying to tuck an octopus into bed, and the tentacles keep flopping all over the place. So that's why the show is called Tuck the Octopus. Okay, so why do you care about any of these things? So there have been some lawsuits with allegations of wiretapping, and the allegations of wiretapping are that we don't have permission to use cookie consent or consent preference. We don't have permission to track a customer's information. And so there have been some allegations of wiretapping lawsuits, which doesn't make a lot of sense because in most states, you can still record someone, and in recording them, it only is a one-party consent state. So these allegations of wiretapping are that on dealer websites and other websites too, that by following them and retargeting, that's wiretapping. Now, I don't buy that argument. Wiretapping requires what's called mens rea, which in the law means that you have to have an intent. So I think it's a long way to go to get to wiretapping. But these are some of the allegations, and this is what's happening or could happen. And we're going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about what to do about that and how you protect yourself. So having a risk and compliance strategy requires a proactive solution here. Compliance is crucial for upholding legal standards, ethical practices, and ensuring the overall integrity of operations. Ensuring compliance is not merely a legal obligation, it's a proactive strategy to mitigate risk and liabilities which could jeopardize the dealership's reputation and financial stability. This is all linked to customer reputation management and customer trust. So the laws, there's 16 different states that have 16 different laws about what you're required to do. And so the legal reality here is, depending on what state you're in, will depend on what you have to do with cookie consent, consent management, and DSAR requests. So it really will depend on your jurisdiction, and which jurisdiction you're in will depend on what laws you have to follow. There's no federal law, interestingly, although Congress is bumping around and talking about creating a federal law. But why should you care about cookie consent and consent management? That's what we're going to talk about. The legal reality is you may not have to care about it, but the business reality is there are solutions that are so inexpensive that it makes it unreasonable for you not to consider the solution, because if you do have a problem and if you do have an inquiry, these solutions will help you and help safeguard the business. Risk mitigation, as you know, is a continuous process. The best risk mitigation that you can do is have early detection and resolution. Early detection helps safeguard your reputation. That helps operational efficiency. And you know, a good risk mitigation program is really the backbone of a dealership. Compliance, there's a new paradigm that I'm sharing about compliance. And compliance really is someone has to do something at some point in time. So if you think about a business and you think about that someone has to do something at some point in time, going to a Monday morning sales meeting, really the salesman has to be compliant. And what that does overall is it mitigates legal risks, and from a continuous improvement perspective, that's how you continue to mitigate risk, because new risks come up every day, and you have to think about what to do about the risk, how you're going to handle it, how are you going to be proactive. Is it a problem that you need to throw your whole body over, or is it a problem that can wait? And so risk mitigation is a continuous process, and something that you should consider. Now, your reputation management gives you, with cookie consent, the whole point is transparency and for the customer to have the ability to customize. As you know, consent is the act of voluntarily giving permission to a specific action. For consent to be valid, the individual must be provided with the opportunity to understand what it is they're consenting to, and it's not valid if it's the product of coercion. So dealerships are a good target and for lawyers, and dealerships are responsible for their data. So we know how much money dealers spend getting customers to their website, and then the dealers become the legal custodian of that data, and the dealerships are responsible for knowing where it resides or how to respond. How can you, or how would you be able to respond right now if somebody inquired and said, I need to know all the data that you're tracking on me? So cookie consent and consent preference, when there's PII, you have to determine, is the customer a prospect? Is there a relationship? And then if the customer asks you to respond to a data request, are you able to export that data to the customer, change it, or delete it? So from a cookie consent preference, consider having a consent banner on your website. Whether you do or do not collect information, and then determine what information you are collecting. If you don't know, then please consider taking a look. And then, especially for targeting and retracking, what is it that you're doing, and then what will provide the best experience for the customer in terms of whether you're allowing them to tell you what their preferences are. Again, this is about the power of transparency and making sure the customer understands what information it is that you're collecting and how you're collecting it, and are you keeping it. So consent preference comes into play when there is PII, or personally identifiable information. If on your inbound forms, you should have consent preference on all your inbound forms. So on your credit apps, your service pages. And what consent preference does is it gives the customer the ability to tell the dealer how they can use the data. That should allow the customer to either be able to ask you to export it, change it, or delete it. That's what a data subject access request, or a DSAR inquiry, is. Now, the United States standard is different than the European standard. Again, I'm just trying to give you a basic understanding here. The United States default is to track essentials for marketing and commerce, and you're going to track the customer unless they opt out. So the United States is an opt-out standard. Europe's default is not to track. This is also known as the General Data Protection Rule. They have an opt-in standard, so completely opposite. In the United States, customers have to opt out of tracking. And as I mentioned earlier, there's no federal framework here, and states have different legislation. To make it even more confusing from a legal perspective, some states' privacy laws fully exempt Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act covered entities. So GLBA covered entities are dealerships that assist with financing. So again, this is a situation where your state law may be different. Each state will be different. A robust software solution on cookie management, consent preference, and DSAR requests are really a set it and forget it thing. They need to be globally compliant and jurisdictionally responsive. Here's what jurisdictionally responsive means. If you're in one state, let's say you're in West Virginia, and you're looking at a Virginia dealership website, you should get served up the information that is consistent with Virginia, with a Virginia dealership. That will keep you out of having a problem. Right now, California has a different standard, and there's a class action suit going on in New Jersey where a California customer went onto a New Jersey website and they didn't serve up the California standard. Now, that doesn't make much business sense, but that is what's going on. And so having a cookie and consent management tool will help you avoid these kinds of very obvious lawsuits. The American Data Privacy and Protection Act, this is the thing I mentioned earlier. The ADPPA is in Congress. It's in a committee. Nobody knows what will happen with it, but I think in the years to come, I think you will certainly hear more about it. So consider dealers should have a platform and policies that complies with minimum standards, are consistent with applicable laws, but are not overly conservative or burdensome as to preventing transacting business. There's a lot of conversation surrounding this, and I'm happy to take your call offline and talk about any concerns you have there. But a platform should not prevent you from tracking GA4 unless you choose to want to not track GA4. So this is all about dealers are entrepreneurs. They understand risk. So we need to make sure that you have choices when in understanding the various choices about what you can and can't do and what the risks are there. So you want to consider a software that has an automated database discovery and recovery system. So if somebody asks you what information you're tracking, that's not something that you want to do manually. That's something that you want to be able to go to your app and be able to track, find what it was that the information that you have, so that you can then go back and present that information to the customer. So again, going back to what I said early, depending on your state, it may be that the legal reality is that you may not have to do any of this, but the business reality is, for less than $100 or something, you might want to have a cookie consent and consent management platform to make sure that if you do have an inquiry, that you have a way to respond. I mentioned, make sure that whatever you do is jurisdictionally responsive and sensitive, because a proper solution will help you avoid fines, litigation, and reputational damage. Now, in my opinion, MNOP is mandatory, not optional. I think you should get your eyes on this. I think it's an important item to consider. It's not in depth. It can be in depth, and understanding the various pieces and parts here can take a while to understand. But I think it's an important topic in your overall compliance program, your overall risk mitigation program, making sure that you're doing what you can to stop problems before they happen. You want to prevent unintended consequences. And that's what risk mitigation is all about, is preventing unintended consequences. So risk mitigation at a dealership is about identifying risks and compliance obligations, prioritizing the work by potential catastrophic problems and willful noncompliance penalties, then reducing the exposure by building a proactive risk transference program. That entails creating internal policies and procedures. And at that point, you can evolve from reactive to proactive to ameliorate your risks. Part of that process is assigning responsibilities and overall accountability to your employees. And then through proper software, you can track progress to protect the dealer, both personally and the dealership. And then any good risk mitigation program routinely reviews and audits the people, process, policies, and technology to document and revise compliance and risk protocols. So if you have any questions, this is me in Times Square. If you have any questions, please feel to reach out to me. My number is 757-434-7656, 757-434-7656. And I'm happy to get your call. You can go to my website, bettervantagepoint.com, and fill out that form. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook and other platforms as well. Wanted to finally leave you with this. The important part about what I do is solve problems. If you have problems in your dealership, feel free to call me. I'll help you solve them. I won't run the meter on you. I'm happy to help you. So feel free to reach out. And importantly, we get you out of trouble and keep you out of trouble. That's what risk mitigation is about. We do this for dealerships. We do this for tech and startups. Happy to give you references. And so that's it for today. I'm Tom Kline. Thanks for seeing things from a better vantage point, and hope to see you soon. Take good care.